Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who is looking for New York City recommendations, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. My name is Sean Callanan, and welcome to episode 332 of Sports Geek. This week, my guest is Ari Mark from the Drone Racing League. As always, I really do appreciate you if you've been listening since episode 1 or if you've just found us more recently, as you can contact me using the old-fashioned method, email sean@sportsgeekhq.com or reach out to me on socials at Sean Callanan on most platforms or at Sportsgeek on several platforms as well. Before I jump into my chat with Ari and talk all things Drone Racing League, as DJ Joel said, I am looking for New York City recommendations. I'll be in New York June 12 to 17 with some work commitments, and then again we'll be there late July after seat. So please get in touch for all my friends there in New York City. I've missed being in your hometown. I look forward to catching up with some of you. And I might even hold a Sports Geek meetup, as I have in the past in New York City, one of my favourite cities in the world. So please let me know if you're in New York City. I'd love to catch up. Let's get into my chat with Ari Mark from the Drone Racing League. Very happy to welcome Ari Mark. He's the SVP, Head of Partnership Development for the Drone Racing League. Ari, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sean. Pleasure to be here.
As I normally do, I'd like to know how you got your start in sports business.
Definitely. Well, it's probably not the most unique story. I think like a lot of kids growing up, I was obsessed with sports. I played a lot of sports, but I knew at a pretty young age that I was not going to be a professional athlete, unfortunately. And so I really focused on different elements of sports. I actually wanted to be a sports broadcaster. So my dream was to be sort of Bob Costas or Al Michaels. But I, from an early age in school, I focused on sports related internships. And when I got out of college, my focus was to land a job in sports. And so dating myself a little bit, but LinkedIn wasn't much of a thing back then. There wasn't the same job boards and connectivity and podcasts and all the things we have now. I remember literally standing in line at career fairs, putting my resume in a stack of papers, trying to get someone to notice me. And ironically, I actually got my first kind of break in sports working for an agency called If Management that represented broadcast talent. So I figured If I can't be Bob Costas, I can work for an agency that represents, manages the talent, helps them find jobs, negotiates their contracts. And I sort of learned how to sell. And it was selling ourselves as the agency to prospective clients, but also pitching our clients for positions around the country. And it sort of cut my teeth in the business development aspect of things, which, I really enjoyed the relationship building side and learning about people's businesses. And ultimately, I found myself at the NBA and working in the league office in business development, working on bringing in new global partnerships, and have been doing that now for the last 15 years or so.
So it is a pretty common story. I mean, both the one I do remember printing off a resume and sending it off to people and doing those things that just don't happen anymore. But a lot of people have that initial sales part of their background, whether it be, inside sales or partnership sales. And it's a really, people say, how do I break into sports? Well, if you can sell and if you can convince people to either come into the stadium or part with money to be a partner in the stadium, you're always going to find a role in multiple sports. So you're in the NBA for a while, doing a lot of global deals and growing the NBA in that 7-year period, and then also spent some time at the Dolphins in the corporate partnership space. What was it like going from the NBA to the NFL? They're very different sports and have different scales and different cadences.
Yeah, well, I'll even go back a bit for the NBA. I was at the NBA for 8 years. My first 4 years was under the leadership of David Stern. My second 4 years was under the leadership of Adam Silver. Both absolutely incredible leaders, but both very different leaders and very much the right commissioner at the right time for the sport. And so I got to see that evolution The NBA was a lot more corporate when I first started and was really much more tech-driven and innovative by the end. But had a great experience, met incredible people, and learned a lot about the industry and how partners think and how to build partnerships that will drive success. But I fancy myself a continuous learner. I also wanted to learn other sides of the business. So working in a league office, my role didn't touch, the team partnerships very much. It didn't touch things like tickets very much, local media rights. And so the opportunity to go to a team was really a chance to broaden kind of my purview on a lot of those areas. I'm also from Miami, Florida. I grew up a Dolphins fan. So the opportunity to sort of move home and have a role with my hometown team was really exciting for me. I think I also got to learn, about other sports beyond, basketball on the NBA side, but also football. A place like Hard Rock Stadium, you're having concerts, soccer, Miami Open tennis. I was there in the early stages of planning for the Formula One Miami Grand Prix, which is now 2 years old. And so an opportunity to touch all of these different sporting events and different audiences, including drone racing, which actually had a race at Hard Rock Stadium during my tenure there, which was my first introduction to this very new next-gen sport.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, moving to that team side and especially the stadium side from a sales and a partnership point of view, you were just exploded in inventory in different assets you could sell when going from, NBA and league level and global deals or national deals and that kind of thing to, being a local market, more activations, more of those game-based pieces. So it would have been a nice way to round you out. And that was your introduction to the Drone Racing League. They sort of came through town and you were like, what were your first impressions of seeing that? Because you were seeing it, first of all, as content. When you're in the stadium, you're like, what is our next content? Is it a concert? Is it a football game? Is it a soccer match? So what was your first impressions?
Well, I think one of the things that struck me was the uniqueness of the audience, but also the value of the audience. And, drone racing is not a sport necessarily for the traditional sports fan. It's actually a home for tech-loving fans that, are looking for a sport to call their own. So when we looked at the younger audience profile, the tech-driven nature, people that, probably weren't walking through the doors of a Dolphins game or a, international soccer match, that was really interesting and attractive to me. And it sort of got me thinking of what is out there for these millions of people that, don't want to watch a 3-hour baseball game, for example. And so that was my first sort of introduction. It was a couple years later when I ultimately took the role at DRL and had an opportunity to reunite with my former boss from the NBA, Rachel Jacobson, who's the president of DRL, and really took it as an opportunity to, help build a partnership business in the model that, was befitting of kind of 21st century sports. And I had, incredible experiences within the NBA and the NFL, but due to the maturity of those sports, there's a lot of stakeholders. There's a lot of, red tape. There are times when creativity can be stifled a bit. And coming to a new and growing organization like DRL, we get to kind of make our own rules and we get to break stuff a little bit and be more creative. And that was really enticing to me, both the audience and the lack of limitations, let's say, to thinking big and executing big.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like you said, the NBA and the NFL have their set ways. This is what gets sold. This is what people expect. This is how it gets reported on. So you are, punching a clock and following a formula. What were some of the ways that you started to unpack? Did you start with a blank canvas? Like when you started a conversation with a partner, in a traditional sense, you would say, here's where the logos are going and here's the hospitality you're going to get. So how did you start that conversation to a partner that's used to getting that, here's the 32-page deck and I know what I'm getting? Like, it's great to have that creativity, but sometimes it can be quite daunting.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, what is your biggest problem? What is your biggest challenge? What are you trying to solve and how can we help? And, we've often done a lot of research and have a better understanding of that before we get to that call or meeting. But our best partnerships are built to solve problems. And it's not about the inventory that's on the shelf. Here's the, logo that goes here. Here's the, sign in right field. It's about creating new things that, didn't necessarily exist. We we've created an autonomous drone racing circuit for a partner that was focused on recruiting the top minds in autonomy, right? PhD level engineers. We created that. When our telco partner said we need use cases for 5G, we built a 5G enabled drone that could stream HD video in real time rather than saying, here's where the big sign that says 5G goes. And so having the flexibility to actually deliver upon what people are looking for, and actually pushing them, right? Everyone sort of says, we don't want cookie cutter. We don't want what's off the shelf. We want to think big. I like to call them on it and say, we can deliver big. We can deliver the custom things. So let's really geek out on what that concept looks like, and let us bring it to life.
So that's where I think, for mine anyway, DRL is different, where most times you're coming with sport as the product and it is an entertainment product, but you're coming with that, but also you've got this layer of, you're largely a technology event company and you can deliver that pieces. So you've got all of these technology pieces that need to be delivered. It's a really great way to showcase different technology. How many of your partners are in that space, 5G and telco, and we want to showcase what we're doing? Is that your first sort of call when you're looking for partners and letting them showcase what they can do?
It can be. I mean, I think it starts with our audience, right? We like to call our fans tech setters, and there's hundreds of millions of these tech setters around the world that are just looking for something different with their sport. They love technology, they love innovation, they still love competition, and they love sports for that, but they're not necessarily getting it from the traditional sports. And so when we think through that lens, our fans are looking at the sport in a different way. They want to understand the physics and the gravity, the engineering behind it. How are the radio frequencies working? And by the way, these aren't things that I was necessarily wired to, coming up in the industry or coming up as a fan, but there are millions of people out there and they're not necessarily being spoken to by traditional sports. So when you look at it through that lens, sure, some of it is what are the tech integrations? And you said it right, Sean. We are a tech company. First and foremost, we're a tech company. All of the fleet of drones are built and maintained in-house. We have patents around the way we fly around these stadiums and venues. The sport only works because we have best-in-class technology and some of the best engineers in the world that are working in our building. And so there are authentic needs. There are things that we can showcase within the sport, and our best partners are helping us grow and accelerate the sport. Right? We want partners that can improve what we're doing from a technical standpoint, from an operational standpoint, from a logistical standpoint, and then we can tell that story really authentically and help them grow their business through that. But it's not all tech, right? We also reach a very desirable audience, a Gen Z audience. We also, from a STEM perspective, there are a lot of brands out there that want to either reach a young talent pipeline or help grow STEM in this world, which is something that is much needed. So it doesn't all have to be, a technology we're using. It's often just people that want to reach our, very elusive audience.
And some of them are right on target. Watching some of the highlights there and watching the pilots fly through, a gate that's branded US Air Force, it's like a perfect synergy for them to go, well, when we are looking for the next Top Gun pilots, we need people that have the fast twitch, the decision-making, doing the maths and, a high end can do all the maths that are required, but still have the skills. And is that just sort of when, Kismet comes together and it's like a really perfect partnership for them?
Yeah, I mean, the goal of all partnerships is to, have an authentic story and have someone say that makes perfect sense. And, the Air Force has been one of our longest standing partners. Obviously, our fans tend to skew interested in aviation, in flying, in the different roles, not necessarily just of flying, but of building, of engineering, how the aeronautics works, and reaching kind of younger audiences that care about those things. So the Air Force has been a great partner in that. They activate in very exciting ways on site. They bring, all sorts of demonstrations and a massive truck with simulators that our fans absolutely love. So, they're a perfect example of a partner that maybe I wouldn't have had as authentic of a story with in a more traditional sport.
And then how do you balance the piece of, you're not coming from the NBA and the NFL, a lot of it's leveraged off that big TV audience. being, still a relatively young league, you're still in that fan growth way. What are the ways that you're looking to build out that audience? It's great having your hardcore tech setters, the drone geeks that are building their drones want to watch it and those kind of things. But how do you also get that broader appeal? Because there is that, families watching, seeing it, and, the really young fans loving it, the high speed action, the hype of the crowd. Like, it's very easy and consumer, like you said, easy to watch for that younger audience. How do you go about, growing that pie and growing that audience for the DRL?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, from a first standpoint, I think audience viewing habits are changing. The notion that, a fan, a 21st century fan is watching sports by sitting down from start to finish and watching a 2 or a 3 hour sporting event, it's disappearing. And, I see it with my kids who are a little younger than the typical DRL fan. They're 7 and 5, but, they are diehard baseball fans. They play Little League baseball. They're not watching a full baseball game. They're, watching the YouTube highlights. They're playing, the Xbox version of the baseball games. They're drafting teams. They're picking fantasy teams. It's a different way of engaging. And I think our sport is very much optimized for those younger audiences that want to view content and interact with sports in a different way. It's immersive. It's short form. It kind of straddles the line between live events, live content, and gaming. There's an esports element of our sport as well. There's a metaverse element of the sport. And so we're talking to fans that are looking for sports that cut across all of those dimensions. So I would actually say we're not aiming to meet the metrics of kind of the traditional sport. We're aiming to meet the metrics of where sports fandom is going and where, our audience currently is, but where audiences are going. But I do agree with you that, we're not looking to have a niche audience, and I don't think we have a niche audience. We want to sort of open the tent to everyone. And we've done a lot recently collaborating with other athletes, celebrities, sports properties, using the drones as the star. And, whether a drone is racing against a Formula One car or tracking Francisco Lindor hitting home run balls in Citi Field, we can play really well with other sports, with celebrities. Our pilots are filming content that's showing up in movies and music and other cultural places that are helping welcome more people into the sport. And probably a long-winded answer, but I'll just end with this. The sport is visually arresting and incredible to watch. And I am very bullish on that. And so there are people that haven't seen it yet, and our goal is to get it in front of them. But, every time I watch someone, whether in person at one of our races or even watching on TV or a YouTube clip, seeing the drones flying at 90 miles an hour, seeing the courses for the first time, there's this amazing, wow look on their face that isn't going to travel well on an audio format like a podcast, but
that's fine. What I will do is I will show them the video of Miami Dolphins Tyreek Hill when they put the goggles on, and he's directly riding side by side, but he's just got the the first person view, and he's watching it, and you can see how blown away he can give. The race finishes and the adrenaline's pumping as much as he's ready to do a touchdown celebration. So I think the piece is how much does the live event piece that's, since COVID and you're starting to get more people back in stands and seeing live DRL events, how much is that a real converter? Like, one, it's great to see it, it cuts well up on Twitch or YouTube or a YouTube short when you're watching it. But when you go see it live, does it have that wow factor like going to the F1 to say, I didn't realize how fast they were going, or seeing them move and that kind of, is the live event thing one that really converts a fan from a casual, I sort of watch it to, I really love this sport?
It's an incredible live experience. It's hard to quantify how sort of powerful and fast the drones are when you see it in person. And there's just this sense that the future has arrived when you're watching a drone race. It feels like a video game has been brought to life, or for sci-fi fans, it's Star Wars pod racing or Tron or something that people didn't necessarily think would exist in this day and age, or not yet. And you see it and there's a sense of amazement. And so we will never shy away from the power of the live event. I think, to your point, conversion is a great word. People leave their first ever drone race saying, I got to see more. I got to follow on all the socials. I got to play the video game on the DRL sim and learn how to fly. It's incredible. But we also know that, similar to the NBA and the NFL and all these other sports leagues, 99% of fans are not going to go to a live event. It's just, we have millions that are watching around the world and, thousands or tens of thousands that can attend the live events. And so we work really hard to replicate the experience in as many ways as possible. And obviously the broadcast, the various content and highlights we're putting together, the behind the scenes and pilot stories, the showing Tyreek Hill and showing his reaction so you can sort of feel that way as a fan of what you would feel not being a professional pilot and seeing, the drones fly like that. So it's all of the above. And, I think that's a challenge for all sports is ideally everyone sitting courtside at the NBA game or sitting, right up against the net watching the drones fly by. But how do we deliver for, the fans that won't have that opportunity? And, it's part of what we think about every day.
So you mentioned it earlier that effectively DRL has sort of multiple facets to it. We've been talking about the live event and, the broadcast and the digital social element of the content. But you've also, dipping your toe in the, actually in the metaverse and then also in gaming and esports. Both have taken a bit of a hit. From an industry point of view, whether the crypto winter and the people wondering what is the metaverse, is Facebook in or is Facebook out, and so there's a lot of uncertainty there. And esports is the same, sort of had a bit of a course correction or a market adjustment. How has it been sort of managing those as segments, but having the pillars of multiple pieces to be able to say, hey, we can help you get into this space and help you understand this space a little better?
Yeah, I think it starts from an expectation from our fans that they want to, be on the cutting edge or the bleeding edge of technology and what's new and different. And they sort of expect from us to play a role in that, whether that's 5G or whether that's blockchain or metaverse. And, not that esports is as new, but still, growing in the broader landscape of sport. But it's, how do we do it in an authentic way that's meaningful to us, right? We are not one thing. We don't fit into any neat box. We're not esports. We're not traditional sports. We're not a metaverse company, but we have elements in all. And when I go back to what we were talking about before with younger fans and how they view content and how they interact with sports, it's much different. They don't see it as this is the real version, and then this is the video game version, and then this is sort of the Roblox version or whatever the case may be. They see it as sports, and they interact with the sport seamlessly through all of those things. And I think that's when I talk about being built for a 21st century sports fan, that's sort of what I mean. And so I don't look at these things in silos. I look at these things as a sort of working ecosystem for our fans, and not everything is for everyone, right? We have fans that want to fly drones. They want to mimic their favorite pilot. They want to compete on the same courses that our pilots have, but they're not able to go to Lone Depot Park in Miami where our race is and get on the sticks and fly on the course. So we have a video game version that allows them to do that. We make it accessible for anyone. You don't need to spend a lot of money on the drone. You don't need to have the space to fly. Crashing is a big part of learning the sport. So you don't need to crash 100 drones. You can play a video game on Xbox, PlayStation, Steam, learn how to fly, interact. There are some people that don't want to learn how to fly. They just want to watch. They like the amazement of the sport beyond. There are some that want to engage. And, our metaverse experience was all about shared experiences, watching races with other people, interacting with other avatars, and sort of having a personality in this virtual world. It may not be for all of our fans, but there are a lot of fans that cut across all of those levels. And I think we have a role in these spaces as long as we do it authentic to our fans.
Yeah. And I guess your job is to, explain those different types of fans you've got in those different areas to your partners. They might come in that traditional sense. I do want our logo on that gate and I do want to activate at your events. But you can sort of give them those breadcrumbs to say, oh, well, we can be putting you in the game. You can participate in the metaverse. And that's back to that point of you're not locked into a set partnership, and the sponsors that want to lean into those areas can be early adopters in that space because you're there as, side by side.
And that's the fun part of the job, to be honest. That's, that was what was so attractive for me coming from, 15 years or so in traditional sports, to say, we have all of these tools we can play with and we can move really quickly to play with them. And so when I'm talking to a partner, understanding what they're looking for, we can be nimble and creative in what that activation looks like. And not everything is for every partner. Partners are working with every sports league for different reasons, different objectives, different audiences, B2C versus B2B, different regions or time periods they care about. But having these other layers in our arsenal, and especially in areas where, differentiated from traditional sports, not every sport is willing to dive in as quickly and sort of be an incubator for other things the way I think a younger growing sport like DRL is.
From the events point of view, are you getting to the point, that F1 is where you're effectively having cities or stadiums or specific venues say, we want our venue to be a backdrop to a DRL race? Is that something that you're, getting tapped on the shoulder and saying, we'd love you to come to our city to put on a show, to showcase, what we have?
Absolutely. When we bring a drone race to a market, there's obviously the spectacular live event we've been speaking about, but there's a lot that goes into it, community engagement leading up to the event. I mentioned we do a ton in the STEM area. So we are out there going to schools. We are working with robotics clubs and engineering groups and, esports teams and clubs, and having experiences where we are teaching the science of the sport and hoping to sort of inspire people in the STEM field through our sport. We bring a ton of those kind of STEM type students out to the races to experience it. We're also doing a lot of what I would call sort of destination marketing, right? Beyond the event itself, we will bring our world-class drone pilots out and film content around the city, different landmarks, showcasing, a city, a country, a region in new perspectives. You've seen the drone fly-through videos of the different stadiums and venues. So we bring all of that together. And often, going back to my Hard Rock Stadium example from the beginning, we're bringing a very new demographic into a venue, right? If it's a traditional baseball ballpark or, football stadium, this is something that's very different and attractive to those venues to engage with new audiences. So yes, we are having discussions globally with, where do we bring the sport and what are the markets that make the most sense for the sport. And it's a fun kind of puzzle to put together. And, the goal is to be sort of the F1 of the skies, right? We want to have that, circuit all over the world where we are not only showing off drone racing, but we are showing off these different destinations to our global fan base.
And especially now you've got all these new stadiums that are being built for, major events, but they've got this really heavy, tech rollout for the fans in stadium. I mean, I'm guessing, if we take back to stadiums 10, 15 years ago, a lot of the stadiums wouldn't have had the tech that DRL need to be able to just run your infrastructure, to get all the drones in there, all the different fiber and requirements you would need just to be able to run an event. Is that one of the key things when looking at what you need to do?
Yes, but I'll give you a yes, but our team is incredible. And I have seen, we don't, as an organization, we don't start with no very often. And so when, it was brought, let's do a race on the Las Vegas Strip outside of an arena where we have to build everything because there's no infrastructure in this plaza, the tech team said, okay, we'll figure it out. And we are not limited in how we get that. It's another benefit of the sport, right? We're not limited to, we need a field of a certain dimensions or we need, these exact specifications. We can fit the racing event into, venues and destinations of all shapes and sizes. And that's kind of the fun part. And so, when someone comes to us and says, can we do this race in this crazy desert location or this abandoned ship or this other thing? It's, we always start with, yes, we could if X, Y, and Z. And that's another thing that's attractive to partners, right? You're not going to get that flexibility with traditional sports in the same way.
It's very much the same way that the guys at Cirque du Soleil design shows. They start with someone says something crazy like, can we do a show with a water pool inside a theatre? And they go, yeah, of course we can. And then they work around the logistics of figuring it out. And like having that creativity across the company, like you said, must be so refreshing to go, holy shit, I used to just walk into a stadium and that would be the game that I would see on the rectangle field to, I'm now doing this and we're in front of a museum or, like we're at the Strip at Las Vegas. So it must provide, every new day must be different at DRL.
Well said. By the way, now you got me thinking we should be flying drones kind of through the Cirque du Soleil show and showcasing from different perspectives. That would be epic.
All right. Well, invite me when that happens. But they're the type of people you really should connect with. They're super, super creative folk that just go, that's literally how they start a workshop. They say, hey, let's come up with the craziest idea without the restrictions of why can't we do it, but just come up with the idea, and then creativity will come from that space. And I can see that you've done that with some of the races. Where do you think, still relatively young as a sport, founded in 2015, it's really hard to put a lens on what things look like in 5 or 10 years. Like, 6 months ago, no one was really talking about artificial intelligence, and now it's the hottest thing. Where do you think the DRL is in 5 to 10 years?
It's a great question. I think we are racing around the world, and we are filling venues around the world, and really activating and lighting up this elusive audience that I'm talking about. I think your point on AI is so great because you see these kind of trends come and go so quickly. I'll say, maybe this is a cop-out, but I'll say whatever that bleeding edge thing is in 5 or 10 years, we will be there, and we will be sort of integrating in an authentic way to whatever those trends are, because we're built to be nimble and the fans expect it from us.
Yeah, and you do really have, similar to Formula One, the circus is coming to town. It's really built for, one, you can follow the event and be really engaged with the event when it's in town, but then if you sit back and you can be following the rest of it, or you could just be that, the DRL's coming to town, I'm going to be there because I know how awesome it is, and it's awesome half because of the racing and the full, but then you've got the whole fan experience, and finding out more about the tech or playing in the simulators and those kind of things that give you a lot of options, and especially as more markets are doing that destination marketing, I'm sure you're going to get a lot of calls from tourism boards or museums or landmarks that say, hey, we want to have a DRL in our part of the world.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, from a participation standpoint, right? You mentioned we were founded in 2015. The first couple of years was more about building and getting the technology right. So we've really only been racing for 5 years or so. We are just getting to the point where the young pilots that are entering the league are saying, I grew up watching this. I grew up watching the OGs of DRL compete, and I knew I wanted to be a drone racing pilot, and I've been practicing for years. And so that is only going to grow and expand. And so, I look at my kids and I kind of laugh and I say, okay, is it, varsity baseball or is it drone racing, right? What are those sports going to be? And so the participation standpoint is only going to grow. I mean, there's, incredible stats about the drone business overall, how much it's growing, obviously from a consumer standpoint, but enterprise standpoint, just massive. And so as drones and technology continue to evolve, I think we're going to see more and more of that. And, the pilots are what makes the sport exciting. The pilots are truly the best in the world. And there is something very meaningful of, being the champion of something and knowing that you are the best in the world. And, a lot of sports are very fragmented and, people can have different claims to who's the best. It is very clear in DRL that this is the cream of the crop. And a lot of our pilots are, having side careers based on being the best drone pilot in the world. I'll shout out one of our pilots, Vanover. He's filming, Michael Bay movies. He shot the recent movie Gran Turismo, which is coming out soon here in the US. They're, using drones from a cinematography standpoint to chase cars and motorcycles and through explosions in a way that is totally changing sort of the Hollywood filming industry. And it's because you have the best drone pilot in the world that can race these drones the fastest speeds through any angle, through any obstacle that it translates. And so I think we'll also see the growth of these pilots as stars, not only as sort of in front of the camera personalities, because these people, these individuals definitely have that, but also behind the lens and being just incredible content creators, and showing off all of these other things across culture with drones.
I mean, that was the other thing we really didn't touch on how people are following the sport. And, we've seen NFL, NBA really go to athlete-led. People will follow LeBron from Cleveland to Miami, back to Cleveland, back to, then to LA. You're seeing the same thing with people falling in love with the sport, but then following a pilot like Vanover and being a fan of them and following what they do both on course or in the game if they're streaming, but then also like following their work because they're like, oh, this is me. I've just taken a drone down to the Grand Canyon and here's a different way of viewing it. And because it's flown by them, it's a really unique perspective. So you've got that hero piece that all sports have to go, who are you going to follow? That's a really big part of what you do.
Yeah, and it's different, right? Because of that, as you put it, sort of off the course or off the track content that the pilots can create. We have a very global roster of pilots. We have pilots from all over the world, so there's certainly some fandom based on who's kind of the home country or the home market pilot. The pilots have very different personalities. These guys are incredible competitors, but some are more of the likable, happy-go-lucky, and some are super intense and competitive. And like any sport, we love the drama between it. But then they have this whole other content creation side of them. We've had people that have been introduced to the sport because they follow one of our pilots on social media for content that goes beyond racing. One of our biggest areas of growth has been TikTok. So, beginning of 2022, we had about 500,000 followers on TikTok, and that's nothing to sniff at. We were celebrating those metrics. By the same time of 2023, a year later, we were over 5 million, and that growth is driven, one, from the kind of the young audience that I've been talking about, but also from drone content in general. And so a lot, I encourage everyone listening to check out our TikTok feed. Let's get to 6 million. But it is a mix of race highlights and pilot personalities and things that are very, endemic to drone racing, but also amazing drone content from all around the world and showing off destinations and drones flying down cliffs or diving through skyscrapers or, tracking a snowboarder as he's doing, flips down the mountain. And our pilots are driving that, and our partners are tapping into that, right? That's part of our ecosystem, is the content creation as well. And so I think that's only going to grow as well.
Terrific. I mean, it is a unique sport in that, we've seen in some of the motorsports. I've spoken to the people at, Formula E where, the racing sims are getting really close to the cars and they're starting to see people go from sim racing into cars, but we're never going to see someone playing FIFA or Madden and then end up on a field, or, I'm great at 2K and I end up playing at Madison Square Garden. But that dream is a definite reality with DRL. You start playing well with the sim and working your way up the ranks. You can get behind a drone and be racing in a couple of years' time. So that must be an exciting thing for all the players out there.
So I'll give you a quick story. So every year in the off season, we do a tournament, a tryout tournament globally, where anyone can sign up and try out to be a DRL pilot. And we hold one of the 12 roster spots in our league for the winner of this tournament. And we, a few years ago, we had a young guy from Germany who won the tournament and, dominated on the sim and was incredible. And I remember meeting him at the first in real life race. And, he was young, he was 18. I don't think he had spent a lot of time in the United States, and he was a little nervous. And I said, hey, how you doing? You okay here? And he said, this is my first ever in real life drone race. He had flown drones before, and he had competed, dozens of times. He's one of the best in the world, clearly, on the simulator. But it was his first in real life drone race, and he had earned his way in the league from the simulator. And by the end of that season, he's finishing, on the podium in front of thousands of fans cheering his name in Vegas. And, ultimately, as his career has continued, he's been one of our top performing pilots from that simulator. And it's a true sort of, Flight of the Navigator, if you've ever seen that film, sort of American Idol or Australian Idol, maybe for some of your listeners. It's a real sort of, dream story that, anyone can do this. Anyone can, it's, unlike other sports, your size doesn't matter, your gender doesn't matter, your physical traits from an athletic perspective of height and weight and those things don't matter. You can learn to do this and you can compete on an equal playing field. And you said it well, my kids will play, Madden. It doesn't teach them to throw a football, but with, our simulator, that is truly, a dream that can come true.
But it is good. I think, one of the phrases I use a lot is steal with pride. Like you go to other sports and see what they do really well. And where you came from, the NBA and the NFL do it really well, where they have these tentpole events out of season that draw the fans in. For the NFL and the NBA, it's the NBA draft. Here's all the young talent. You might have known them. You might have followed them in college. And you have to reinvent that because you're like, well, we don't have a college system. We don't have kids playing it in high school leagues and then leveling up. But having that, like you said, American Idol type of event, is terrific content, create some of these stories, but again gives you, putting your sponsorship hat back on, more assets to say, oh, you want to talk to our fans when they're just coming into, when you've got new fans coming into the league because they're following these stories too, and then you get that great content of, first race of all time and the behind the scenes and all the content you can do for that is something that, fans who want to be part of the inner circle will just lean into.
100%. I mean, first of all, imitation is the best form of flattery. So if you're not, being a fan of sports and not just sports, music, entertainment, culture, we're watching everything. This is a great idea. What's our version of this? How do we do this? Also, we don't like this. Like, the way they did that is not how we would operate things. So of course we're going to, I won't say steal, but of course we're going to take inspiration from, the leagues that have a 50, 100-year head start on us and are incredibly successful. But I think you also hit the nail on the head, right? To me, there's probably two sides of fandom, right? Is the sport cool? Is the sport engaging? Do you like to watch it? And I'm incredibly bullish on that part of our sport, both from a live experience, but also from, watching a race on broadcast, on stream, et cetera. And then there's, why do I care, right? Why do I care about this person versus this person? And that's, the storytelling aspect that's really important. And, I won't judge too much about the history of Formula One, but I will tell you, as someone that was not a huge fan, a decade ago, when they got the storytelling piece through Drive to Survive, you've seen the meteoric growth, right? The sport was always, this is really cool. Cars are going fast. And that's not meant to undersell it. It is incredibly cool. And the cars go incredibly fast. But it wasn't, at least probably here in the US, it probably wasn't until people started to say, why should I care? Why should I care about, Max versus Lewis or Max versus Checo or all of these other things, or, the team principals and their rivalries. And so we spend a lot of time on that, right? Within our broadcast, within our content, telling those stories and sort of inspiring that notion of who these individuals are and why you should care about, the outcome of the race.
Terrific, Ari. For mine, really did appreciate it. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you? What's the best platform and what's the best way for them to connect with the Drone Racing League?
I mean, as far as the Drone Racing League, follow us on all of our social media. I gave us a plug on TikTok already, but we have, incredible content on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, et cetera. And you can watch all DRL races on those platforms. So we've taken a sort of free for everyone wide stream approach. You pick your social platform of choice and you could watch free, full DRL races for free on those platforms. As far as getting in touch with me, probably LinkedIn is best. I probably get a lot of messages, so be thoughtful. And, I'm
so
always
open. What I do say is if you're going to reach out to Ari, and I do want you to reach out and say thank you for the podcast, tell him that you listen to the podcast. It makes it very easy to realize where they've come from. I was going to go to the Sports Geek Closing 5. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
It may not be the first, but I will tell you the most memorable as an
That's
early
fine.
stage.
No one can Google the answer, so there's no wrong answer here.
Fair point. Cut that out. No, I went to the first ever inaugural, at the time, Florida Marlins baseball game, which was at the time, Joe Robbie Stadium, which is now Hard Rock Stadium in Miami.
Yep.
It was, I was a 10-year-old kid. I'm dating myself now, and I had been a baseball fan, but I'd never had a team in my local market. And I went to the first ever game and watched Charlie Huff strike out Jose Offerman for the first out in Marlins history. And I am still a fan today, as are my kids.
Terrific. You would have been to a lot of sports events in your time. Have you got a favorite food memory or a go-to food at a sports event, or is there a particular food that is synonymous with DRL events?
Well, as someone who is either at a sporting event at work or probably with my kids, I will say hot dog, because it's quick, easy, and you can down it, you can take a quick walk and be done with it and not have, to hold. I will say the sliders at Hard Rock Stadium are incredible. I think they're called A1A burgers. So if you're at Hard Rock Stadium, go get an A1A burger.
Terrific. What's the first app you open in the morning?
Unfortunately, it's probably my email, which is probably a bad habit, but we are a global sport. And so waking up to whatever is happening, what has happened overnight is definitely part of it. Or probably the ESPN app to check scores. I often fall asleep with a West Coast NBA game on or some other sporting event. So I wake up to see, who won that game.
Is there someone that you either follow on social media or an author that you read that the listeners should check out, and why?
I'll give you two answers on that. I mean, follow on social media, since I brought him up before. I would say Alex Vanover, who's one of our championship pilots and is just creating unbelievable content across music, film, sports. His Instagram at Captain Vanover, Vanover, is very incredible. And it's a good way to learn not only about DRL as a sport, but about our pilots. From an author, I love James Clear. Atomic Habits was one of my favorite books ever. He's got a great weekly newsletter that I read, and my team, if they're listening to this, will probably roll their eyes because I'm constantly sending them little tidbits from it. But I thought that was an incredible book.
I completely agree. I read that recently. I think I was late to it, but a really good read. Lastly, you might have spoiled it during the episode, but that's fine. What is your social media platform is your MVP? And maybe answer that personally, and then maybe also what's the MVP platform for DRL?
It's hard for me to characterize.
It's like picking your favorite child. You've got to pick one. Yeah.
I always tell my kids my dog is my favorite child, so it makes it easy for them. But no, I think it's an honest answer. We use our social platforms very differently, right? From a personal level, Instagram is to keep up with family and friends. Twitter is to get my news. TikTok gives me the feeling of being young and, clicking the channels on TV and not knowing what you're going to see. I'll say YouTube with my kids is fantastic, whether it's I'll show them concerts of bands that they've heard of, but they're, unlikely to see. We watch a ton of highlights, to my point earlier, that they're not going to sit for a couple hour sporting event. They watch YouTube Kids, which we know is a safe platform. And as it relates to DRL, I mean, it's all of the above. We use them in different manners, but I would say our TikTok is one that has really resonated with audiences because we're short form and immersive, and it's very easy to get, engrossed in the sport from the medium of TikTok.
Yeah. And I think if you go back to one of your former bosses, Adam Silver, I think TikTok gives those little appetizers of the sport that draw you into longer form. And for longer form for Gen Z is I'll watch it on YouTube and I'll get 7 minutes, and that is long form for them. But it brings in more people. So I think that that quote that he did give of hey, we want to give snippets because more people will want more of the game, I think still holds true, and that's why TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Reels are still exploding for most sports because it's easy to consume, but then it does bring in more people for the overall sport.
Yeah, and to a point we discussed earlier, it's a sort of working ecosystem, right? They're not necessarily competitive. They're not one or the other. I'm sure everyone you ask this question to, no one's like, I only use one and I never touch the others, right? They serve different needs, both personally and professionally.
Well, Ari, thank you very much for coming to the podcast. I will put some links to the DRL social and some of those videos with Tyreek and Vanover into the show notes. I look forward to checking out a Drone Racing League event in real life sometime soon. thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'll leave you with this. Many people say that drone racing was invented in Australia. That's a kind of a rumor that's been going around. So we would love to bring a race to the market at some point. So I will keep you posted. Hopefully you can come watch it with me in person.
I'll help. I would love to help broker that. So let's see if we can make a deal. The governments here love to bid on sporting events. So as long as we get 2 or 3 of them frothed up, then we can. Then they'll get excited. So we'll hit stop and start working on that deal.
Let's do it. I love it.
Why not book a Pick My Brain session with Sean Callanan? Go to sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain.
Thanks again to Ari Mark. Please connect with him on LinkedIn. And as I said in the interview, please tell him that you listen to the podcast, either comment on my post or if you're going to send him a message to connect, tell him that you listen to the podcast and maybe ask him a question or tell him what you learned from the podcast. So I really do appreciate when people reach out to guests and thank them for being on the podcast. They give up their time to be on the podcast and share their insights. And I'm very appreciative of both their time and your time listening right now. And if you can give the Drone Racing League a follow on all platforms, but especially TikTok, it would be quite the feat if the Sports Geek audience can deliver that next million of TikTok followers to Ari. But yeah, check it out. It's very, very exciting. Before I want to wrap this up, I've had a few questions recently, and I had a call recently earlier today with a listener. Reached out, said, "Hey, I want to catch up," because they're like, I don't know what you're doing now, Sean. I don't know how the sports geek business has changed. Are you still doing what you used to do? What are you doing now? Has it changed post-COVID? And it was a really good check-in to sort of, explain what we are doing now and what we do from a day-to-day basis when we're not producing a podcast or producing a newsletter. And one of the ways he described me, which I was absolutely thrilled with, was digital Navy SEALs, where Navy SEALs come into a tense or chaotic situation and help execute at a high level and help extract you out of a problem. So I still think we do a lot of that. So I love that description, digital Navy SEAL. So thank you very much to Ward, who gave me that term, and like I do, I will steal with pride. The sports geek business is really changing, both with the times and the market. When we started, we were pretty much being chief digital officer on call for teams that didn't have that digital capacity or digital capability internally. But now what we're seeing is many teams are building a big capacity across digital and across ticketing and marketing and using some of the different channels. So what we offer in training teams up has changed. We still provide that digital Navy SEAL element of going in and helping with a particular problem, whether you're trying to tackle a new market, tackle a new platform, introduce a new product, all of those kind of things, and sort of looking at all the different pieces of what digital offers, not just social media. And then also, how can you be more efficient in what you're doing? So a lot of times it's a bit of a review of what the process that your team is going through, how it's working with different departments. We find there's a lot of uplift and those kind of things, but then also whether it's a new product or something new and you need some left brain thinking, something to spark up the team, those kind of workshops are something that I still really love doing, as well as doing the other work like we're doing with the NFL in this market in Australia and producing content for them. So, the business model is changing a little bit. We're doing a little bit more on the media side as far as producing the contents with things like the Sports Geek Amplify series with Seat. But then we're also still doing that project work, helping people better understand what they should be doing from a digital strategy point of view, depending and that changes depending on the maturity of both your fans and the market and what you're trying to do in the market. So the short answer is we're doing a lot of different things. We've got a really broad scope from our experience in either working with a team or a league or a stadium or a federation or an NSO. But my main thing is hey, give us a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call or send me an email. Book in a time. I'd love to have a chat and figure out how I can help you, or maybe it's a case that I can point you in the direction of someone who can help you. So please, if you ever have a question to go, oh, how can Sports Geek help? My answer will be yes. I love helping Sports Geek listeners. So if you think that's you and you're nodding right now, drop me a line, Sean at Sports Geek HQ. And until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Do you get Sports Geek news? Sean Callanan analyzes the latest sports business articles for you weekly. Sign up at sportsgeekhq.com. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.